And clearly one of the key concerns, of course, relates to transportation and safely not just having a safe environment in the school, but also what can we do with the transportation component of this and leveraging in different ways. So I'm really, really excited to have a lot of regional experts here to help us with this. I know we have a lot to cover, so I'll keep my stuff short and brief. We will talk a little bit about a number of changes I think that have happened over time in terms of where things are. As you know, there's a lot of pressure from a lot of different groups to make sure that the schools do reopen. I think teachers, administrators, parents, everybody understands the importance of having kids in school. The question really lies in terms of how we can provide a safe environment and not eliminate transmission, but I think reduce the risk of transmission. So transportation, of course, a key piece of this. As you know, we've been putting together a playbook that's all on the website right now for the ICS website. You can go in there and take a look at all the different information, but also all the presentations we've done, all the PowerPoint, all of that information will be up there for you to download. And then in terms of the content today and also the process, just want to make sure that please use the chat button so that if you do have any questions, we do plan to leave time at the end of it so that we answer a lot of the questions that you may have. So let's keep moving, Aaron. Just a quick disclaimer, I think everybody's aware of this. We're providing a lot of information, opinions, recommendations, and ideas. We're not legal experts, we're not physicians. We can't make those determinations. Any issues that you run into, please consult with your own experts internally with your school district to make sure that appropriate policies and procedures are being followed, because every school district is different. Let me pass it on to Jeff Schultz. Jeff, if you want to kick it off, introduce yourself and the team.
Good morning, everyone. Jeff Schultz, one of the principals here at ICS. I'm pleased today to have that opportunity to help, hopefully help school districts out with what will be a significantly challenging situation here. Start of school. I'm going to have the opportunity to introduce our panelists and that have been helping us out with this. We'll then talk a little bit about transportation safety. We're going to talk about the capacity of the building and how that is going to impact transportation and how many kids you bring and when you bring them to the various schools. Integrating with that scheduling and how important that is. And then we're going to have the opportunity to have the superintendent from McRae just kind of talk through the experiences she has, as she's been working ahead of the game, I would say, with regards to planning her transportation processes. And then we should have plenty of time for question and answer. Again, use the chat function to please throw your questions out. If we don't get to them all today, we will answer them all on our website. Next. Have the opportunity to introduce the team. First of all, welcome Fred Nolan as a consultant to ICS. Many folks know Fred was the former executive director of MREA. Aaron Smith is assistant general manager at 4.0 Services. They provide transportation outsourced services to 25 to 30 rural community schools throughout the state. They've been really analyzing and looking at this in detail, so appreciate Aaron helping us out. Amy Teetens is a transportation director for Intermediate School District 287, serving West Metro. She was also Transportation Supervisor of the Year last year. Welcome, Amy. And then Sherry Broderius is Superintendent McRae. Those that know Sherry know she's a planner, and she's really been on top of this and in a proactive way, really looking at transportation. And by the way, if you think we have all the answers on transportation, well, we don't. But we're going to be able to help, at least provide some insights to help everyone with this challenging situation. I'm going to now turn it over to Fred Nolan. Fred, just do a little kickoff and get this thing rolling. And Fred, you're muted.
Thank you, Jeff. If you recall the agenda, this is a yes and problem. Conceive of it that way. Yes, we have to have the safest transportation for students to and from school to prevent transmission of disease. And it's a capacity building problem, not the capacity of your building, which is a specific issue, but the capacity of your transportation system. And how can you build that? Because the transportation is likely to be the choke point in how many students actually can come on a given day in a hybrid model. It's probably not your facility, probably not your staff, although those are also issues. And so the first thing you're going to want to do is to put together a planning team for transportation. You're obviously your transportation director of management, your principal who knows the families, and maybe several principals in elementary, middle, and high school. And finally, someone who can really turn your student information system on their head. That's going to be an issue. And also if you have a route planning software system, whoever can run that as well. So now I'm going to turn it over to Aaron from 4.0 and talk about the first priority, which is safety. So start with the drivers there, Aaron.
All right, thank you very much for having me. Appreciate the opportunity. Yeah, one of our core values, obviously, as a transportation company is safety, obviously for the children we transport, but also for our drivers, our employees. I also handle all the workers' comp claims for our company, so this is a special area that's very close to my heart because I get saddled with the paperwork involved. So I'm always looking at ways to create a safer environment for our employees. So in regards to this situation, the things we're looking at first off is minimizing exposure for drivers. There's a couple different areas. Obviously, they come in contact with the office staff at our locations, with their fellow drivers, and then obviously the students on the buses. So we want to take every reasonable precaution we can to protect them from any possible exposure and infection, because we all know there's a driver shortage to begin with, and if we start losing drivers because of the illness, it's going to put us in a bad situation. So we want to do everything we can. So social distancing, we're all familiar with that. We want to make sure that our drivers aren't congregating in the driver's lounge, just because that's going to be a hotbed for infection. So whether, in a lot of our cases, we're closing the driver's lounges. We're not forbidding them from congregating. If they do it, we want them to do it outside and maintain social distancing. And we're encouraging them to wear masks. We're providing masks for all of our drivers. Given the environment, I think that's just something that we need to do. We're also doing that for our paraprofessionals as well. Again, just minimizing the risk for these employees involved. In addition to the cloth masks, there's been some back and forth about the plastic face shields. Initially, the State Patrol said the face shields were not okay for the drivers because of the curve in the shield tended to distort their vision. The latest I have heard, they have backtracked on that and said that the plastic face shields are okay. So we'll take that and run with it as long as we can until they decide otherwise. And the last thing is arranging alternate transportation home for students who become ill at school. So student shows symptoms at school, we're not going to want to allow that child to ride home on the bus and possibly infect the drivers or the other students. All right, as far as recruiting drivers, again, driver shortage is nothing new for us. A current bottleneck we're facing right now is with the closure of government offices and testing centers. Just getting potential drivers in to get their learning permit or current drivers renew their licenses is causing a bit of problem. So there's going to be some planning ahead, and it's going to delay the number of new drivers we can get in before the start of the school year. The good thing that the state did is typically there's a 14-day waiting period. So once you pass your written permit tests, you have to hold that permit in your hand for 14 days before you can take your behind the wheel test. What the state has done is waive that 14-day waiting period. So as soon as you have that permit in your hand, you can schedule a behind the wheel test immediately, and you're eligible to take that. So this is great if you're having drivers coming from other industries that already possess a CDL. They can take their school bus or passenger written tests, and they can test right away. And there you go, you have a driver ready to roll in a matter of days instead of weeks. Something else we've come across that's one of our company managers came up with and has worked really well for us is using the district-wide email to send out a request for drivers, let parents know that, hey, we're looking for drivers, and this is what we're offering, and we're getting pretty good returns on it. I think we're all kind of surprised at how well it's working. Instead of just parking a bus in a parking lot somewhere around the town with a banner saying we're hiring, being a little more proactive and sending out those emails is really proven returns for us. So we're really excited about that. And in the recruiting process, especially right now, drivers are going to have concerns about safety. A lot of our drivers are of a certain age that they're in that risk category of 50, 60 and above, and they may have a lot of concerns about possibly getting ill. So we're telling them the safety procedures we have in place, everything we have planned, and I think that helps make them feel a little bit better about the job. And lastly is increasing hiring bonuses, referral bonuses, retention bonuses. That's nothing new in our industry, but when you look at your driver roster, never hurts to sweeten the pot a little bit and see if you can get some more people through the door. And the last part is Mike Hennick, our company owner, always says this, that no one knows that they want to be a bus driver until they actually are one. I don't think if you talk to any of our drivers, not many of them would say, yeah, I always planned to be a bus driver, I always wanted to do it. It's one of those things they just kind of fall into, stumble into, and they say, you know what? I really enjoy this. I never thought I'd be a school bus driver, but you know what? I enjoy the kids, I enjoy the job. So that's a fun part of it. All right. Student safety in the hybrid model, scenario 2, requires 50% maximum capacity and maintaining social distancing of 6 feet. If you cannot maintain that 6-foot distance between students, you do have to reduce capacity below 50%. So that 6-foot distance trumps the 50% capacity. One of the ideas I think is great that someone else came up with was color coding every other seat. So when you're running 2 tiers, double routes, for one section of it, you have the kids sit in one color seat, and the second time you have them sit in the other color seat. So that will keep them from sitting in the same seats and again, reducing that chance of infection. With that 6-foot rule, also that means that seat behind the driver is empty. So you cannot put a student directly behind that driver. They're going to have to be across the aisle and back in our plans. Families can also be in one row on the bus. So that does help with numbers. Again, I guess, unless they're requested otherwise by parents, keeping them together in that schedule. So also not drinking, not eating on the bus. Most of the time we don't want them doing this anyway because it creates a mess, but especially now increases that transmission risk. And lastly is changing a loading procedure, making sure when that first child gets on the bus, they go all the way to the back, they sit in the designated seat, and that bus continues to load back to front. That limits the amount of exposure the other students have, so students aren't passing each other as they're getting on or off the bus. So that will certainly help. Right. Amy, you're going to talk about these?
Yes, welcome everyone. Thanks for having me today. So like how I was introduced, I am the transportation manager for Intermediate District 287 in the western suburbs. We have 11 member districts, and so challenges that we have is we don't transport our students to and from. I do the midday, and then I work with the transportation member districts to do that. So Right now, I have quite the job working with all of the member districts and then working with our staff to come up with a plan. So a few things just for you to keep in mind, 50% maximum capacity. However, like Aaron said, you need to keep that 6 feet distance for social distancing in mind as well. Set protocols. I know a lot of our member districts, what they're doing, because we have a couple of them right now that are transporting some special ed students for ESY summer school right now. And what they did is they are just communicating very well with their principals, teachers, and with the parents. And they're making sure that they set protocols in place and have the parents where they're doing a health check with their son or daughter every day. And that consists of taking their temperature, making sure that they, are feeling okay, they don't have a cough, things like that. So that's important to do. Also make sure that your bus staff, that supervisors are just checking in with the supervisors, but again, following social distancing, and then asking questions, taking temperatures, and just making sure everybody's okay. And then again, do the best you can with the social distancing. And that can be more challenging, with the bigger districts. But I think, trying to make sure you're routing where you're loading the kids that get on first in the back to the front so they don't have to pass will really help. Sanitizing the vehicles in between the routes. But one thing that's very important, if you can strongly recommend that the bus staff and the students wear a mask. I know a couple of our member districts are talking about this summer that they've had a couple situations where students have got on the bus and they did not have a mask, and the driver's asking where the mask is, but they just found out they can't refuse the kid, because if they refuse the kid, they can't just have them, back on the bus stop and nowhere to go. So, they'll let them come on, try to keep them social distancing, have them check in at the office, and again, make sure that their temperature is being checked, and just doing the best you can. Again, working with principals, I'm going to be presenting to our principals tomorrow, and we're coming up with a plan. Like I said, our member districts, because they transport, that's more of a challenge for us. And I've had quite a few of my member districts, they want us to send a list for the hybrid plan. They want to send us a list for, an A group and a B group. And, we're fine with doing that. The only thing is, when we have kids come from the different districts, a lot of them live let's use Eden Prairie for one example. They're one of our member districts. We could have kids that live on the east side of Eden Prairie or the west side of Eden Prairie. And if we put them on two separate lists, that would work. But if we have both kids that live on the east side, let's say they live a block away, and we have them on a separate list, that could be a problem. So what we decided to do is we're having all the districts send us their 100% capacity routing list by bus route. And then we're having the teachers and the principals get together, and they're going to split the routes that way. So again, just do the best you can, with splitting that. But with special ed kids, there's a lot more things to think about. The lower cognitive kids and the younger kids really maybe don't understand social distancing, and the bus staff wearing the protective equipment could scare them. They could try to grab it. A lot of kids with autism especially don't like things on their face. Things touching them can bother them. I mean, I don't really like wearing a mask. I got a new mask, and there was like a clip behind my ear, and it was bothering me. Well, someone with autism, that could really cause a lot of stress and anxiety for them. So we just really have to think the best we can of how we can do things to help the special ed kids, especially try to understand, that we're doing this for their safety.
All right. So another part of precautions we're taking is cleaning and disinfecting of our buses. And this is something we started at the end of the school year when we were transporting students last year. And something we're going to increase, obviously, the frequency of this year. Looking at the CDC's guidelines, the one thing I took away from it is simply disinfecting the bus isn't always enough. If there is dirt or things on there, you actually have to clean that surface first, remove the dirt or any other substance that's on there before disinfecting the bus or that surface. That will help the disinfecting process. So I thought that was something interesting that I didn't know before. When you're driving, and this obviously in Minnesota, there's a very small window of time when we can do this, but opening the windows to increase air circulation. Don't necessarily have to open all the windows on the bus and don't open them all the way, but you can open some of the windows in the back of the bus and open some of the windows in the front of the bus just to get that air circulation through there to help, keep fresh air moving. Also in between routes, they're suggesting, leaving the windows open up the emergency exit. Again, just to let the buses air out and reduce any contaminants that might be in the air. As I talked about before about loading and unloading students, this is something we may want to get ahead of before the start of the school year and instruct parents on. Say, hey, there's going to be a new loading procedure this year. When you get on the bus, you have to go as far back as you can, and this is what the seating arrangement is going to look like. So the schools can certainly play an important part in that role in helping us communicate that to the students that are going to be riding. Also ensuring parent attestation. And, this is making sure that when a parent sends their kid to get on the bus, that either the parent has taken the kid's temperature to make sure they are within healthy range, or just saying, I know my kid's feeling good. They aren't showing any signs of illness. So when that, as a driver, when you pull up to a bus stop and the kid's there, you feel confident that the parent is, doing a good job of making sure that that child isn't potentially ill. Also, assigned seating on buses. And this is, something we've looked at. It'll help as far as planning, knowing which kid is going to be sitting where. One of the things we're talking about with districts too is having a strict, I don't want to say a ridership roster, but if you're not assigned to be on a bus on a given day, you're not going to be allowed on that bus. So if someone wants to ride home a bus with their friend to go to their house after school, we have to look at, is the school going to allow them to do that? Because that is potentially taking a seat away from someone else on that bus. So that's something we need to look at. And lastly is ensuring communications between school and transportation department. And obviously that's the daily back and forth of this is capacity issues, we're dealing with this and that. But also when it comes to if you have a student or a driver that's showing symptoms, as the bus company, if we do that, we're going to let the school know right away, hey, this driver is showing symptoms, they're going in to get tested, to let the school know so they can let the kids on that route know, the parents know that there's potential exposure. And likewise, we hope that the schools will let us know that, hey, this student on such and such route was going in to get tested because they were showing symptoms, just so we can let that driver know and they can get tested if need be as well. So it has to be very clear lines of communication back and forth between transportation department and the school. All right, as far as bus garage, terminal, other things we're doing, taking temperatures every day of the drivers as they come in, like so many other places, just checking their temperatures, making sure they're in that safe zone. Also looking at staggered driver arrival times, like you talked about earlier, trying to minimize the congregation of drivers to limit exposure. Cleaning the areas that they do use. Obviously, we're not going to forbid them from using restrooms, whatnot, but just making sure that we have a rigorous schedule and documenting the cleaning, so we make sure that we're not missing any scheduled cleanings. And obviously encouraging good hygiene, hand washing, hand sanitizer, everything that we can do in regards to that. And then the donuts, coffee, things like that. Probably won't do that just for the greater good. So.
Well, thank you, Aaron and Amy, for going over the first priority, which is safety. But now we need to get to the second priority, which is how do you increase the capacity of getting students to and from school? The first recommendation is to look at the minimum or maximum distance for walking and raise that to 1 mile for K through 5th grade and 2 miles through 6 through 12. We've gotten to the point where we're transporting a lot of students due to safety issues or due to parent requests where they could be walking. Now, to increase safety, take a look at some resources from the National Safety Board on walking school buses and safe routes to school, so that you can be sure that parents feel comfortable and also that students are safe in walking to school. This is going to be a change for many communities, and you either have railroads or you have state highways where you have to make sure that students can safely walk. I do believe that parents are willing to work with you because they know the issues and would be willing to cooperate and perhaps even become that person who runs the walking school bus. Private vehicles. We've got parking lots full of juniors and seniors who drive to school every day. See if you can get those families to have the older child drive in the siblings and drop them off at the schools where they're supposed to be on the days they're supposed to be there. And that's why you bring families together on your cycle schedule so that can happen. You may also want to encourage families to informally carpool. They do need to be consistent. This may be especially true for students that are coming in on days that in addition to their cycle day. In other words, this may be primary students, grades, K1, 2 for reading that are coming in almost every day, and the days they're not on their cycle, maybe the parents can carpool and bring them in. You can also contract directly with parents to transport their students. The MSBA has language on how you do that. It's generally been used if a student has to be transported to the border of the district for open enrollment, but that can be reversed. If you have a family where actually it's going to be simpler to actually contract them to bring them into school rather than arranging the bus to go a long ways to go get them, you can do that. Finally, consider your busing capacity. Count your families and calculate your average family size and how many students can be transported in one run. And consider adding a second run, what Aaron talked about, doubling up the routes. Because you're only going to be picking up 12 to 14 families, your bus routes are not going to be 45, an hour and 15 minutes. They're going to be out and then come back in. And so maybe you can stagger a route that goes a long ways out with a shorter route and double that. So really work with your transportation department, work with your contractor to see if this can happen. I would suspect that yes, it's going to cost a bit more, but not doubling your transportation costs to run doubled routes since we're limiting the capacity on each bus to so few students. Next slide. Clearly, you need to communicate with your parents about all these changes because you need their cooperation and in multiple ways. And you may need to have virtual meetings with walkers to make sure that they're cooperating with you and they know how to get their how you're together going to get students safely to school. Again, I talked about inquiring about juniors and seniors, carpooling. you're going to want to survey your parents at some level to get this information back. Aaron talked about that. Maybe he has a survey that you can use, but you're going to do this either as a standalone survey or run it with some other information that you want from parents. SurveyMonkey is a good tool. There's a free version that you take up to so many parents. There may be other tools as well, but you're going to need to do that as well. And finally, you're going to have to follow up with your non-responders. We're so used to a technological world that you may need to actually call parents who aren't responding. This is going to be so key to being sure that you can transport or somehow students are going to get from their home to school and back again safely, and you have the greatest capacity to run the hybrid model. Next slide, Aaron. This is where it gets tricky to integrate with scheduling. Normally, transportation runs their scheduling separate from the principals in the school. All the kids come in on the same day. It doesn't matter to a principal what bus route they get in, and it doesn't matter to the transportation director what classes or grades they're in. This is not that situation. You're going to have to determine a cycle of days, whether you're a very small school, you can actually bring every kid in. Very few schools can do this, but we do have overcapacity in rural Minnesota. There are some schools that can do it. More schools are going to be either on an AB schedule or ABC schedule. Some of your larger districts may have to go to a 4-day schedule because they've had so many kids in classes, they simply can't get them small enough. And then you need to balance your cycle days with families because you're going to bring in whole families. And then you're going to cluster those families on cycle days for efficient bus routing. As Amy was talking about, she wants to pick up students from a specific part of a community on a cycle day and other parts on a different cycle day. So then you're also going to determine students are going to bring in additional days. We're actually going to be doing a webinar tomorrow that goes into more information on how you actually build these cycles and what 3 schools are actually doing to do this. Then you take off your walkers and families, and now you're ready to determine your bus routes. Now you also have to subtract those who have asked for an alternative education system, which would be distance learning. I would check out the communication webinar that's already on the ICS website for information about how parents are to self-identify for needing distance learning and not bringing students to school. With all that in place, we're ready now to do this dance with Aaron. So Aaron, if you'd start talking about design tips and we'll close this slide together.
Right, so yes, the big $100,000 question is what happens with our routes. A lot of that depends on how you as a district choose to tackle it. If you're able to, break it up by region, bring certain parts of town in on a certain day. One district we're dealing with is simply breaking it up alphabetically. So whether it's students with the last name A through M on this day and through Z on the last day, or basically figure out what works best for you. There's a lot of legwork to do in this to figure out those numbers, and that's why those surveys are so important. There's going to be a fudge factor where you're going to have parents that don't respond. So that's going to cause issues, and you have to figure in some wiggle room, because odds are you can have your bus roster scheduled to where you think you have everyone on there in the first day of school. There's probably going to be 1 or 2 kids that show up at a bus stop that weren't on the list. So, capacity wise, you have to kind of have to account for that. So, the way we're looking at it through our district is we want to keep our routes as consistent as possible. There's enough change with the start of the school year, enough chaos as it is. So we feel that if we can maintain somewhat consistent routes, that's going to benefit everyone. So again, that depends on how the school wants to handle it too. But I think it's easier on the students, on the parents, and on our drivers if we keep running that same route and just adjust accordingly for any little hiccups or capacity concerns that may come up. Again, you know, maximize our efficiency. We try and anticipate ridership the best we can. It's not going to be perfect. You can do everything you can, and like I said, you're going to miss some kids. You're not going to hear from some parents, and things are going to change. So just be prepared that, you know, what you do on Monday might not be what you do the rest of the week. So what we're finding is, you know, adding additional tiers to those routes. So you shorten up what was normally one route, you break it in half, and you know, you run that tier twice, pick up the kids, try and figure out where you're going to be capacity wise, get that first run in, head back in, drop them off, and head back out and pick up the rest of that route. And that's where the flexibility with the school comes in. You know, if you have that soft start, where you can drop some kids off and they have a study hall or supervised study, whatever it is, for the first half hour, 45 minutes of that day, just so they have some wiggle room so we can get all the kids in and then they can begin. And the same at the end of the day, as you let some of those kids out for that first tier, the other kids have a study hall, whatnot, until that bus is able to make it back in to complete the second half of that tier. So could you go back to the previous slide there, Aaron? All right, other factors, just making sure you allow time for cleaning in between routes, wiping down those hard surfaces, those surfaces that are touched frequently by the students. Do that as best we can. So figure in, you know, do a dry run of how long it takes you to wipe down that bus. Figure in that time in between those routes. Also communicating with principals. Again, communication is key. Whatever schedule the school is going on is working hand in hand. And yeah, just a lot of back and forth saying this is working, this is our challenges here. On this day, we might have some issues where the other days it might run smoothly. So just a lot of back and forth, a lot of working together. That's what it comes down to. So again, go ahead.
Yes, Aaron, that's so true. I mean, you and the routing department may say, you know, because it's a state highway, I can only go north on one day. I want to come south on the next day. Even though they look like they're next to one another, can you separate those students and put them on different cycles? Or it could be the principal saying, hey, I got too many second graders coming in on day B. I can't handle that. I need to shift some families or some individuals. Now, hopefully your walkers and private transportation will handle that problem. But this is going to be a back and forth, just like Aaron said, I accompany to a dance. And that gets full about nothing's final till it's final. Parents will be calling school, what day is my kid on? They'll be calling Aaron and say, when's my kid get picked up? Well, until you put it all together, you can't really say. So really try to keep communication consistent, have consistent messaging about when you expect to have this information out and how you intend to disseminate it. And finally, anticipate changes. We know you're going to get the call to the transportation or the office says, oh, on Monday, my kid's going to grandma's. Can you take him there? Well, normally it's an issue, but it is handleable. But if you're not going in that direction on Monday, this is now a huge issue. So you may have to tell parents, if we do that, we have to change the cycle days, or no, I'm sorry, we can't accommodate that. You'll have to arrange private transportation to grandma's if that's what you want, And I know that's going to cause some issues. And finally, Aaron talked about each day may be different, but I think you're going to have to really clamp down, as Aaron said in an earlier slide, this is the bus you're assigned to. This is the seat you're assigned to. You can only ride in the seat you're assigned to the place you're assigned. And families are going to have to play dates separately and not rely on school to transport them home. And again, that's going to be a change. So all these things are come together in the end. And so I see we got a lot of questions on chats. We need to keep on moving. So Aaron, the next slide. Also, nutrition has been delivered to homes through the buses and through drop-off sites or pickup sites through the summer. There's a couple ways to do this. If you're going to deliver the meals on the afternoon routes for the next day when the students are home, you can put the meals in tubs behind the driver. You'll need to add a para who can actually then place those meals, maybe perhaps in a tub on the lawn, or have the parents pick them up. And this has been going on through the summer in many districts, but notice you'll lose a seat capacity if you do this. So you need to think about that. There are some districts that are taking a full day for distance learning, usually on Wednesday, and they're using their buses to deliver nutrition. Aaron, anything you want to say on nutrition delivery? Because I know you've probably been dealing with it most of the summer and last spring.
Nothing too much. Again, it's just communication, figuring out what works best, what the school wants to do, given their student population. I know in one of our areas, the superintendent had just wanted us to simply set up drop points, basically parking lots where the bus would go somewhere, and then the parents would come to get the food, or students would come and get the food. And luckily our manager had been doing it long enough that she knew that certain housing developments, you know, a lot of parents work during the day and the kids wouldn't be able to get there to get their lunch. So she would simply schedule a new stop there at that housing complex. And we were able to get the lunches to those kids, and you didn't have to worry about parents being available to come get the food for the kids. So just knowing your students, your populations, and challenges that are faced. If there are a lot of parents that, for the most part, work during the day and aren't going to be available to assist, whether it's getting kids on the bus or getting lunches, that kind of thing. So just taking those things into account is very important.
Okay, thanks, Aaron.
And
Next slide.
Fred, if I could add as well, we've been delivering non-perishable food to our families since March and through the summer. And what's helped is we've used our staff school paras to be on the bus with the bus drivers. And we make sure that we have the social workers communicate with the families, a few days in advance. And then when the bus is 5 minutes away, the staff, the para that's riding, calls to let them know we're coming. And then we did have protocols, or we do have protocols in place exactly that, like Aaron said, we have a plastic bin that we put out, and the family comes and gets them when the staff goes back on the bus. And when they get done, then the para goes back and gets the box or the plastic bin. So, and then they, wear masks and just so everyone feels safe.
Thank you, Amy. That's really good advice. And so next slide, Aaron. One of the things that have come up very recently is around dismissal. Because picking students up, you're going to pick the furthest student up, they're going to go sit in the back seat, and it's going to load back to front very easily. It's going to offload in the morning front to back. But when students are in their classroom, it's a different situation, so that the students are dismissed in a way that they load the bus back to front. And so districts are going to need to figure this out. A couple ideas are to have the last class of the day for students. That teacher has a roster of students and their seating arrangements, and they're instructed to dismiss rows 10 through 12 at 3:05 and at 3:07, 7 through 9. So students are walking out of the building in the order they're going to load the bus. There's multiple ways to do this. And there's also more considerations about low incidence students, and this is in a link that is on our webinar. And I'm going to turn it over now to Sherry Broderius, Superintendent McRae, to talk about her total story and the potential soft and start ends to the times of the days that she's thinking of. So next slide, and Sherry, please.
Thank you. Yes to everything everybody has said so far. And I hope that as I explained, the Great McRae experience, or otherwise known as the Great McRae experiment, we'll see how this goes. But I hope to show that we have tried to incorporate everything we've talked about. So what did we need when we decided about a month ago, because we couldn't afford to wait because we start school on August 17th. So what did we need to get started? What did we need to bring to our planning session? We needed an infinite campus list of families listed from the largest families to the smallest, including student names, grades, and which elementary building they went to. We asked our bus manager for route sheets and Google Maps. So Palmer Bus provided that for us. High school class list by first and last names, and elementary class list by first and last names and which elementary building they went to. Make sure you get last names when you start doing this. You can't just have Paul and Fred and Aaron and Jeff. You have to have last names. And then I see people are kind of talking about, what about hyphenated last names? And we even had double hyphenated last names. And we also encountered split families where 1 week a family might be living with a parent in Raymond and another a parent in Sacred Heart. So make sure you have that name. And that's part of the knowing the kids that Fred talked about earlier. What do we know about the families to know that the child lives with different parents? We also needed the electronic spreadsheet, and we are dividing kids into blues and green groups. So here's what we did. We started with the largest students. So we had the largest families. So we had our elementary principal running the spreadsheet and looking at elementary classrooms. We had the high school principal looking at high school grade levels and running our infinite campus list. I had the bus routes and I had the Google Maps. So we started with the first family, we started with the largest families. Those are families with 5 kids in our case. And we started putting them on the route. So, okay, here's family LMNOP. They're on route 5. I had to look at the address of the family, find that they were on route 5. So we put those kids in the very back of the bus. They are a blue. We started with the blue families. When that bus got to the point where we had, by spacing, socially distanced every group, and we started with the largest to get the most kids on the bus at the first. That is how we worked this. But at one point, got to the point where our elementary principal said, grade 2 at East is now full for social distancing. We have 11 kids. We're also considering, as we do this, how large are the classrooms? A lot of people are saying, how many kids can you put in a classroom? Well, it depends on the size of the classroom. So we also were in tune to how large is the classroom we're putting these kids in. So when our elementary principal said, oh, we got to stop, that room's full, the rest of the kids in that room became green families. So we continued with our routes, we continued with the list. Some of the routes still had room for more blues. And then the high school principal, well, we've got 8th graders, we're full, we've got half of our 8th graders are blue. We need to switch 8th grade always to being green. So that's how we went through the whole system. It took the 3 of us, and especially someone who lived in the communities here. We're a community, we're a school of 800 kids. I would say this could work for up to probably 1,000 kids, and then maybe pieces of what I described being a microcosm within larger routing systems and larger districts. But what we have found out after we did this, and it took the 3 of us 11 hours to do this, and it has since we finished. Let's go to the next page, Erin. What did we learn? We learned first, find out which kids will not ride. As we've said before, which are student drivers, which students distance learning from home, which students, based on our new safe routes to school assessments, do we have that could be walkers, rollers, or bikers. We also looked at which are teachers' kids. Teachers, could they bring their kids to school instead of having them ride the bus? or other employees. And as we went through this, okay, there's going to be tweaks. You're going to encounter a situation like we did where we went, oh, the split family situation, what do we do about this? So keep notes going on the side. We don't know what to do about this. When we got to the walkers, or we got to, oh, this child will ride with her mom or dad to work, we put those names off to the side, but they always got a color. They always had to get a color, or if you're doing A, B, or whatever, always got a color. So there will be tweaks. Decide if any grade levels. We should maybe have decided earlier if any grade levels we're going to attend every day. Since then, we decided preschool and kindergarten are going to attend every day because it's just good for them academically, and they need to get into the routine of what they're doing. So that would be my recommendation, though. If you're going to have any grades that are going to be coming every day, know that. Again, I'll say this is kind of like the dance Erin was talking about. There will be tweaks. There will be lists that happen, new students that come in. Make sure they get a color, make sure they get on the route, make sure you're talking to your transportation director all the time. We have a real shuttle issue, which probably a lot of you do unless you're all in one campus. So we keep talking to our bus supervisor about, okay, now what are we gonna do? Special ed students, we have some special ed students according to their IEPs that we're saying, you know, there's a lot of autistic students who really need to be in school every day. Okay, good thing we went through and everybody got color coded, or in some of your districts you're saying are A's or B's. So that in a really fast run through is how we decided a month ago to do our system. Just yesterday and today, we've also discovered something that we never intended would happen. And that is, as our high school principal and counselor are going through now later to split the kids again, they're finding there's a natural split. Probably, maybe it's luck, I don't know. But our elementary principal had also a similar split. It worked because now we're doing the hand checking of what about this case? Okay, is this classroom double checking going to be big enough to have 11 kids in it, 12 kids in it? So there's all the handwork that needs to be done. When you're done, it's time consuming. But I think we all found we learned a lot about our kids. We learned a lot about our district. We're learning a lot about transportation. And it was a really good experiment.
Well, thank you, Sherry, Superintendent McRae. That was really good. Erin, I think we'll go to the questions on the chat line. And then if we have time, Amy Teedens can make some remarks again as she's gone to a national conference, and she's also a specialist in special education, low incidence transportation. But let's take the questions now, Erin.
Yes, one question for Erin. Could you share a sample of the district-wide recruiting email?
Yeah, I do have an example here. If anyone would like a copy of that, feel free to email me. Be more than happy to share that with any of you. And the same goes for the survey that we used at one of our districts to get a feel for ridership from the parents. So yeah, anyone feel free to email me that, and I'd be happy to share that with you guys.
Thanks, Erin. Question for you, Amy. Are you going to have masks on the bus to have for those students that do show up at the bus stop not wearing one?
Amy, you need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Sorry about that. That's a good question. As far as with our member districts, you know, they would have to decide if they're going to be having masks. I know I've talked to a few of them, and they want to encourage the families to supply their own masks, but they will have some masks on the bus. And as far as, we have shuttles and midday transportation that I arrange, and we will have, some disposable masks. I've been working with our safety person in the district. And as you know, at first it was hard to find, to be able to even purchase masks, but now you are able to do that. So, work with your safety person, and again, encourage the families to have their own, but I would strongly recommend having some on the bus just in case.
Thank you, Amy. There was a question from Belinda, but I believe, Aaron, you answered that question with the last district-wide recruiting email. So we'll have that parent survey available as well. Question for probably Sherry. I know you alluded to this in your talk. What would you recommend for families that have children with multiple last names?
Again, it's having somebody there that knows who I'm not exactly sure what the question is asking. Is it, where do they live now? But it's a matter of knowing who those kids are and having that principal there, or an assistant principal or a counselor, somebody that's working with you as you go through that, so you know which route they're going to go on. I don't know if that answers the question, but the person's welcome to email me if they'd like.
Okay, thank you, Sherry.
I think what her question was, and I know we've talked about this in our issues meeting through MDE with transportation managers. There's families that have, let's say they have 4 kids in their family, and maybe 2 of them have a different last name. So again, have to just make sure that you're communicating with the schools, and they should know that information. Or if you can match up, if they all live at the same address but they have different last names, make sure you keep that in mind.
Thanks, Amy. A question for probably Fred. Can you please explain again if there needs to be temperatures taken when students get on the buses?
Well, I think Aaron explained that you want the parents to attest that the student is safe getting on the bus. Because if you, first of all, your drivers have enough thing to do to drive the bus and make sure students are where they need to be. And secondly, what do you do if the student has a temperature? You just can't leave the student at the bus stop there. So the reliance is on the parents to do that. Aaron, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think that sums it up pretty well. We don't want to put our drivers in the position of, there's a student getting on the bus, maybe it's a first grader, second grader. Parents drop the students off at the bus stop, they leave for work, and you take this child's temperature and it's high. Well, we're not going to leave a first grader just sitting at the bus stop. That's really not a safe thing to do. And, the bus driver is going to be able to contact the parent. I would have to go through transportation department to get a hold of the parent, and that bus would have to sit there and wait for that parent to come back and pick up their kid from the bus stop, because we don't know if that child can get back in their home. So that's something we really don't want to do as a practice.
And MDE will be coming out with guidance, and Neil Carlson, if he's still on this call, I'm sure would have some ideas about. That would be an incident then that you have to address as you have a ill child who was exposed to other children and adults. And hopefully MDE is planning on coming out with protocols for districts to address incidences of COVID in the schools, and that would fall into that category.
Okay. There was a last question, but I think given that it's a very specific scenario, I would like to maybe tee that question up to this group after this webinar, and then we can circle back with that individual if that's okay.
Okay. Well, we're getting very close to the end. Amy, any last things you'd like to sum up since you're Transportation Director of the Year and went to a national conference and also on the MDE group advisory? Anything we haven't touched on that you would want to emphasize at the end here for us?
Well, again, I work with special ed students mostly, and that's going to be, your most challenging group. Again, a lot of times the kids don't understand social distancing, and especially with your lower cognitive and students that have autism, social stories are really good. So, in in my district, we have wonderful behavioral specialists, and I've been in IEP meetings where we've had, transportation incidents, and we talk about it, how to resolve it. And a lot of times social stories really help. And so I would encourage communicating with the parents, communicating with the teachers, and especially for the kids that have autism and the lower cognitive, having the parents work with them ahead of time on social stories. And that could be with a PowerPoint, or having the behavior specialist, make up a social story in pictures and have the parents working with them, before they go to school. Another thing a lot of districts are doing too is, even though I know our resources are limited, if you can add a para to a special ed bus. Usually you don't have a bus para unless the student's IEP, says that's needed. But, to help these kids understand about social distancing and to make sure everyone's safe, that would be a good idea if you could have a para on the bus to help.
Thank you, Amy. Any last words, Jeff, before we close this? And I want to thank everyone for staying on. It went a little longer, but that was great information. Jeff?
I would like to thank our panelists and presenters. I appreciate the time and effort that you put in to help with this very important issue. I also like to just remind folks, we do have a webinar scheduled for 8 a.m. to 9:30 tomorrow, talking about the hybrid educational model, and then some districts explaining what they're doing and how they're working through it. I've had the opportunity to be working together with Fred on that, and I think what these districts have put together will be very helpful to look at what some of your maybe neighboring, whether it's a large, medium, or small district, has to offer and what they're thinking through. I think you'll find it very beneficial. So I encourage you, if you have the opportunity, to attend that tomorrow. Otherwise, everything will be listed on our website. Aaron Smith, if you can provide your surveys to us as well, we'll also incorporate that information on our website, so folks can easily find that information. So with that, I want to wrap up and say thanks to everybody. Have a great day.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.